Hi, everybody. Eve Harrow on Rejuvenation for the Land of Israel Network. It is a beautiful day here in Efrat. It happens to be Tanit Esther, the fast of Esther, which is the day before Purim. I'm pre-taping this show because right after Purim, I'm going to be heading to Washington, D.C., to AIPAC. We have a fantastic event, a Yesha event off campus, off AIPAC, to promote Judea and Samaria and the importance of the Jews, of course, remaining at home in Judea and Samaria and the future of these areas. But I'm sitting right now with an old friend and my mayor of Efrat, Oded Revivi, who is going to be actually speaking at formally in AIPAC. It is the first time that a representative from Judea and Samaria has been officially invited to speak at AIPAC. And so it is a tremendous honor. And thank you, Oded, for joining me today. I know you've got a crazy schedule because you're also heading out to Washington. So thanks for carving out a few minutes for me.
Thank you.
Okay, so what is the event? What is the panel that you're going to be speaking on in AIPAC? I assume some of my listeners are going to be at AIPAC and will want to come and hear you.
Well, that is a bit harder to answer what's the panel going to be about because just like when I organize any conventions, you know that between the title and what's going to come out of it afterwards, there's a very big difference and uncertainty. I can tell you who are the people who are going to be taking part in the panel. So as you mentioned, I myself, as a representative of the Jewish people living in Judea and Samaria, the moderator is going to be somebody who used to work for AIPAC. And on the other side is going to be Mrs. Polly Bornstein, who used to be the general director of V15, who were extremely involved in the elections of 2015 under a charter of one, let's make sure that Prime Minister Netanyahu doesn't get elected, and number two, therefore, a two-state solution. Today, she's heading a different NGO because V15 was critically examined and accused of interfering with Israeli politics with foreign money. So they've got now a new NGO called Darkenu. They've slightly changed tactics. Now they claim that they represent the majority of the people of Israel. How did they determine that? Which party they're backing that is representing the majority of the people of Israel? All that is hidden from us. But basically, I can only guess that the panel will go for a one-state solution, two-state solution. The title that they gave it, I think, is Catch 67, bearing in mind that they thought that Micha Goodman, who wrote the book Catch 67, will be the moderator. It seems like they had a change in personnel and he's not showing up. So that's where I think the panel is going to go. Okay,
so as I said, this is the first time, and you are the foreign spokesperson for the Yesha Council, for the umbrella organization representing the communities of Judea and Samaria. Why do you think it has taken so long? I mean, this is, Howard Kors was the head of AIPAC, has come out in favor of a two-state solution. The issue of Jews living in Yehuda and Shomron and Judea and Samaria is like the elephant in the room. I mean, everybody talks about this issue, but they very rarely talk to the people actually living here. We have to have our own events outside of AIPAC. So after so many years of AIPAC, this is actually the first time that there is a panel with a representative, an official representative, and you've been invited, appearing. Why do you think it's taken so long?
Well, it's an excellent question. I'm not sure I have a solid right answer. I can tell you that 2.5 years ago, when I took upon myself the position of the chief foreign envoy of the Yesha Council, understanding that the Yesha Council doesn't have a lot of funds, I don't have a lot of time. The challenge is enormous. How do we create a difference in approach towards 500,000 Jewish people living in Judea and Samaria? Those were the challenges. And what are we going to do? And basically what we put as one of our first goals was to try and engage with as many leading organizations and trying to use their platform in conveying our messaging. And it started off with addressing AIPAC delegations when they remembered to invite us, when it was convenient for them to invite us, where it was convenient for them to invite us, i.e., they could tackle me and say to me, Oded, we need you to address a delegation that we have sleeping in Tel Aviv. They're waking up for breakfast. They need to be out of the hotel at 8:45 for a tour in the Ramat HaGolan. Will you come and visit them in the Tel Aviv dining room? I could have said no, it's really not convenient. But as we said that that's one of our challenges, we started going around to dining rooms, 8 o'clock in the morning, addressing a group in the most unfriendly environment with background noises of people eating. But that was the slot we were given. Then we moved forward to a 10 o'clock slot. After they left the hotel, they were driving towards Ramat HaGolan, so they were willing to do a slight detour and stop in Alfei Menashe, observing the view from Alfei Menashe of Tel Aviv and the whole Dan region, and then they would give me half an hour to speak to them in Alfei Menashe.
Alfei Menashe, for my listeners who don't know, is a Jewish community across the so-called Green Line, okay, a settlement that is on the western side of Samaria. That the view from there, I mean, you see where 70% of Israelis live. You see the entire coast.
Right. So you mentioned it's in Samaria. From Efrat to there to drive in the morning, it's at least a 2-hour journey. Again, I could have said, no, that's not convenient. But no, we went to Alfei Menashe. We were given a small, tiny room in the JCC with no air conditioning. Not the most accommodating scenario to speak to these delegations, but we did it. As you understand, it gradually grew on them that we have something that their delegations are interested in hearing. And we managed to get to a situation where today, I would say, on average, between every 4 weeks to every 6 weeks, we address the delegation of AIPAC. They come already to Efrat. We decide the scenery in which they see us, how they see us, what they see us. And you know what? I would even guess that one of the main reasons that I was invited this year was a very successful meeting that we had with a delegation in the Gush Winery, the Gush Etzion Winery, of the leading donors. And because I understood it was such a high-profile delegation, I also brought some of our Palestinian neighbors. So they would understand the reality, the way the local people see it, and not according to what they're being trying to be instructed from a satellite dish. The responses from that meeting were so warm and supportive that I think unanimously all those leading donors said, you have to make sure that this person appears in the national conference. And that's basically what happened. Now, I reached out to one of those people and I said, will you be willing to give out a statement about it to the Israeli media who discovered that I was invited to AIPAC? And he said, yes, of course. And, you know, even in the interview he gave Israel Hayom, which is a national newspaper in Israel, he said, I don't agree with Oded. I don't come from the same political background. But the way he presented the information, the way he showed us reality, is an important thing that should be on the stage in AIPAC. So, yes, we got one slot. We could have got more. Once we're already traveling to DC, time is not really that much of an essence, and I could have appeared in more platforms. But as far as I'm concerned, it's definitely a break-in. It's definitely a statement. And it's definitely, as you said, the time has come that they will hear this voice, not in a breakaway event that we did in the last 3 years, but really in the main conference.
Well, what you were able to do, I think, is show them that while people are talking about peace and coexistence, we actually are acting coexistence. I mean, the idea of talking about coexistence and pulling the Jews out of Judea and Samaria and then somehow calling that coexistence is just absurd. And we see, and you know as a mayor and having a lot to do with the villages around here, the Jewish villages, the Arab villages, have much more to do with each other on a day-to-day level than people think. And that's supposedly what we're all going for, is coexistence, is learning to live together. But I think that's fantastic, especially given the atmosphere sometimes that you find now in the United States, of somebody publicly saying he doesn't agree with you, but he still feels that your voice needs to be heard. Because so often now, the only voices that people want to hear are echo chambers, are saying exactly and only what they think.
So I would add on that 2 points. Number one, regarding the titles, peace and coexistence. We live in a crazy world. When I address delegations, I say to them, hey guys, I'm an active member of Peace Now. The only thing is I don't pay my dues to that organization. As a religious Jew who prays 3 times a day, I can't say that I'm not for peace. Now look what happened in the last few years, especially in the left camp, the peace camp, the supporters of all the peace process. They're calling for a divorce. That's the campaign they led in Israeli national scale, a divorce from the Palestinians. Okay, that's not even peace already. It's a withdrawal with no agreement, with not knowing what will the future bring with it. That's where they're now campaigning for. That's where they're leading for. If you want to try and find the difference between the different parties running for Knesset now in Israel, there are those who are saying we might not have an ultimate plan. We don't know how the ultimate goal is going to look like, but it is definitely involving the Jewish people staying in their homes and understanding that the Arabs are not going to go anywhere. Where the left parties, they're calling for a divorce, for a separation. There's no call for a peace agreement, because basically after the Oslo Accord, after Ehud Olmert, after Ehud Barak, they've realized that that chip has lost its value and it's not relevant on the table at the moment. So that's regarding peace and coexistence. The other thing was echoing your, or being able to express your views. That was another great impact that we got from the AIPAC delegations, because sometimes they like to create a debate. They don't like it just that one speaker holds an audience, even though I told them, listen, I can hold an audience for an hour and a half, just give me the stage. They prefer to have it as a debate, which I think is less effective, because basically you have a moderator who asks questions, then each person has to respond to what the other person said. You're losing valuable time, but again, I'm giving the slot, that's what I take. And we appeared in such a debate, and I appear in such debates, whether I'm against Yariv Oppenheimer, who used to be the director of Peace Now, against Poli, who used to be the director of V15, or against Stav Shafir, member of Knesset from the Labour Party. And we had one group of rabbis from all different types in the United States, Reform, Conservative, Orthodox. And one of them said, and he raised his hand and he said, I don't have a question, but the fact that you two different, maybe extreme opinions are managing to sit under the same rooftop and have a dialogue, a civilized dialogue, that's something extremely refreshing to what we're used to in the United States. And I think that was another backwind which helped the AIPAC organization understand, you know what, maybe we can bring some controversy to the conference, because they always used to say to me, no, we can only bring issues in consensus. We'll bring Iron Dome, we'll bring Israel innovation. We don't discuss the topics which are in dispute, which my response was like yours, but the listeners can't see it. It was like a grin, who are you bluffing? But I think the fact that their delegations said, look, there are two people with different views managing to have a dialogue, let's put them on the stage. And that's basically how they treat us. They treat us like a couple of comedians who come and give a good entertainment for an evening. But as I said, if that's the slot we're given and that's the shot we're given, we need to try and make the best out of it.
Yeah, and I think a lot of us, that's what we do all the time, and that's what I do all the time. But one of the things that's interesting now that's happening in the States that I'm not so sure that the AIPAC organizers anticipated when they organized this so many months ago is what's happening with the Democratic Party. That now you have members of the American government, especially part of the Democratic Party, who have come out blatantly anti-Semitically, against Israel, and that a lot of the people who attend AIPAC actually are Democrats and have been Democrats their entire lives, and are now suddenly finding a very uncomfortable situation where members of their own government are coming out against Israel. Where do you put this? She tried to walk this back a little bit, Omar, in an op-ed, but it's understood that, and she's for a two-state solution. So now what does that mean? If somebody who, like her expression about the Benjamins, I mean, that is just total anti-Semitism. That's disgusting. And she's for a two-state solution. So now what does that say? If she's for something, then maybe this is dangerous for Israel, because clearly Israel's security and the longevity of Israel isn't one of her priorities. Maybe in here you can get the Americans to do a slight rethink about, what they have been considering about Israel and about Judea and Samaria for so many years.
Well, first of all, I'm definitely going to try. But what we see in the Democratic Party in the United States, we see it in other parts of the world, we see it in England, it's it's a bit like waves, and we know that there are waves when anti-Semitism rises and when it goes lower down. And we definitely shouldn't keep silent when we see such statements, op-eds, opinions being expressed. But having said that, we should also not ignore, abandon the Democratic Party, because we don't know how elections will come out, when they come out, and who are we going to see in the Oval Office in a year and a half, in 4 years, or 5.5 years, or in 8 years. And we have to be prepared for any scenario. And I can tell you that this week, I actually had dinner in Jerusalem with a person who is a Democrat, who is planning to announce that he's running for president in the United States. And, you could say, what is Oded wasting his time with this candidate who might be running for presidency? And I say, we have no other choice. We don't have the right to vote the American president according to his views, according to what he says or supports. And we need to try all the time build bridges with all the different parties, whether they are with us or without us, and whether some of their representatives are completely out of order, saying things which shouldn't be said.
And I think that's why also you have not a few Israelis going to AIPAC. I mean, myself, I'm still an American citizen, and I can vote in American elections, and I pay American taxes. And so going to AIPAC for me is also going to people whom I know and who I speak to during the course of the year when I travel there. But there are quite a few Israelis going as well to really, this is one of the major points. And I think that the relationship between American Jewry and Israel is incredibly important. What usually grabs the headlines are the things that divide us, maybe some of the more religious issues or women of the wall and things like that. But there are still so many things that bind us together. And I do believe that the way Israel goes is also going to be a reflection on what's going to happen in American Jewry. You can't separate diaspora Jewry from what is happening here in Israel.
I think, just to add one more point, we might like to criticize AIPAC, say that they're not exactly acting according to what we want, but we can't take from them the power that they have built throughout the years. There have been many attempts. There still hasn't been an organization which is as powerful and influential as AIPAC. And AIPAC is also going through changes because some of their donors are less of the traditional donors that they used to have in the past. Their donors sometimes are ones who support or are against the two-state solution, and they want to have their politicians, their representatives on the panels. So I think all that all together is indicating that the organization is listening to the changes. If it's rapidly enough, accurately enough, and as we would like, it maybe not, but we have to cooperate in that respect.
What I love about AIPAC, and I've been going there for years, is just you're in a building with tens of thousands of people who love Israel and may have differences of opinion, again, politically, religiously, where they see Israel going, what's important to them about Israel. But it's tremendously powerful to be with so many American Jews and non-Jews, incidentally, not a few non-Jews who come also, who really love and appreciate the state of Israel. And as an Israeli, that makes me very happy. So Sunday night, we have a Yesha event. We are going to be doing, in the Museum of the Bible, a reception where people will get an opportunity to talk to some of us who live in Judea and Samaria. We're going to be hearing from some members of Knesset, Amir Ochana, I believe Gidon Sar, Tzachi Hanegbi, and you as well. So that's already a different audience. Those are people who are really coming because they understand this issue. We've got a lot of competition that night. This is certainly not the only reception, the only event that's happening. It's a very, very, very busy few days in Washington, D.C. So you're going to be speaking there as well. And what are you going to be telling that audience?
Well, you're absolutely right. It's a completely different audience. It started off 4 years ago when we thought, wow, there's this big Jewish assembly happening in D.C. and the Yesha Council is not represented. And at that time, we weren't invited. So we did a small reception in one of the lobbies of the hotel. It grew gradually to last year having an event that there were 400 people inside the hall. There were, I predict, another 300 people queuing outside who weren't allowed to go in because of regulations of how many people the hall could actually hold. And this year, we hired a bigger hall in the Bible Museum, which can seat 700 people. And without even putting out any information yet, we've got over 500 people who have registered for the event, which is quite crazy and just shows the demand of people who want to hear the truth, want to hear the facts on the ground, want to hear it from a person that knows it and lives it and doesn't come with filters of what's politically correct to say and what's not going to rock the boat too much. And I think it will be, at the end of the day, a huge support for the Jewish people living in Judea and Samaria. And I hope that that will influence AIPAC even more to understand that this is the crowd that's in DC. You need to address them as well. The Americans, the Jewish Americans, all the time talk about widening the tent and how much do you pull the sides of the tent. Listen, if you want everybody under the tent, you need to understand that there are people of these views, and they're vocal, and they're powerful, and they're influential, and they should be taken into account as well.
And of course, timing being everything, it just so happens that we've got Israeli elections just a couple weeks after AIPAC this year, which wasn't that wasn't the date of the Israeli elections when AIPAC was planned. And I hope that American Jews and all Jews outside who sometimes don't understand how Israelis vote the way we do will understand that the issue of Judea and Samaria, while it might have been sidelined in other places for a long time, or at least we weren't spoken to, is very central here because we understand the corruption of the Palestinian Authority. We understand on the ground how miserable they have made the lives of their own people because we live with them here. And we see that many of them have told us personally, although they will never say it on the camera because then they're afraid that they'll get killed by their own people. And you've had that's happened to you here. The famous story where you invited some of our Arab neighbors to your sukkah and then they were arrested by the Palestinian Authority. So we see here what coexistence really means. We understand here that putting Israeli sovereignty on Judea and Samaria, which is something that I know that we both feel would be very important, would be good for everybody living here to live under Western laws, not just the ideological ideas of the greater land of Israel, but just day-to-day environmental and road safety and so many of the things that for most of us is really what takes up most of our days, that both Arab children and Jewish children should be able to grow up in an environment that is so much better for them than the environment that's now being provided by the Palestinian Authority, aiding and abetting and funding terrorism.
Well, you're absolutely right. I would just add on that 2 points. Most Americans don't realize they come here, they explore this region, they compare the state of Israel to the Palestinian Authority. They see the level of structure and infrastructure and standard of living, and they ask, how can you allow yourself? Can't you see the poverty on the other side? They fail to understand that the Palestinian Authority was established, whether we like it or not, whether we agree with it or not, whether we protested against it or not, with a plan to create an independent Palestinian state. We're 25 years after the Oslo Accord. The Palestinian Authority is completely dysfunctional. It's completely corrupt, like you say. Palestinian people haven't had the right to vote for their leadership for over 13 years. When you tell Americans, you know what, let's see if the president can postpone the date of the elections by a week because the weather is going to be better for him to get reelected, they all laugh, okay? We know the rules of the game. You can't change things like that. Yet here, the Palestinian Authority hasn't put their office into election for over 13 years. Why? Because they're afraid they won't be able to control the results according to what they want them to be. And that's something that Americans are unaware. When they hear about it, I think it's a big shock, because when you come as an American with all the values of freedom and democracy and you hear that basically we're dealing with people who completely don't act according to that, then they start to understand who we're dealing with. Another thing which has happened last week, which is a really, really maybe game changer, is the protests in Gaza. We've had protests in Gaza for already quite a few years in different mannerisms and in different areas. But last week, for the first time, the people of Gaza went out and protested against Hamas, which I don't know how many people can understand how revolutionary that is, because usually if you just speak against those Arab regimes, there's a death sentence against you. And if that protest grows wider and becomes more vocal, then there is a chance to see here some sort of change. Because as long as the leadership is corrupt and doesn't really care about its people, then the people don't even have an opportunity to cry, never mind an opportunity to express their views and vote their opinions.
And Gaza is a classic example of a place that Israel left like Sinai, like southern Lebanon, that turned into absolute chaos, that a totalitarian regime took over that's miserable to its people. Gaza is a miserable place, but not because of Israel, because of their own leadership, because of Hamas. And maybe their people there have finally had enough. I don't know if that means that the people are going to not hate Israel. The fact that they hate Hamas doesn't mean that they also can't hate Israel. We have to realize that we live in a region where old enmities die very, 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 very hard. And these ideas of honor and shame and tribal loyalties don't go away so easily. But I think it's clear, definitely to the Arabs that live within Israel, and 20% of Israel's population are Muslims with the full rights that you and I have, and members of Knesset that they'll be voting for. Not all the responsibilities, they don't have to go into the army, but definitely the rights. And so I think we and I know you're working hard on it, I'm working hard on it too, to get people to understand that being against a two-state solution is actually being for peace and coexistence and wanting all the people in the region to have a better life. They will only have that better life when Israel is the sovereign and not these totalitarian and horrific leaders that they now have. So
I would just add on that, I think one more thing needs to be realized, and I think in that Prime Minister Netanyahu is absolutely right. If the Arab people would have realized the right of the Jewish people to have a Jewish state, would have been on a different page in a different book. You've mentioned we've withdrawn from Gaza. Just last week, we had 2 missiles flying from Gaza to Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv was never part of the equation of occupied territories, of confiscated land, of illegal settlements. Tel Aviv has been there since the day of the establishment of the State of Israel. It does, okay, but regarding...
Actually, since 1909.
Right, but regarding the framework in which we're talking, it's just a reminder that Judea and Samaria is not the issue. The settlements are not the obstacle for peace. It's the existence of the Jewish people in the Jewish state. What are the borders? Where is it going to lie? That wasn't really ever the issue in dispute, despite what some people might try and force us to think that's not the claim.
Right. No, this is a regional issue, and the so-called problem of the Jewish people having carved out a space for ourselves once again and being in control of it in the Middle East is really what's bothering people, and that's just too bad, because as we head into the holiday of Purim, we can see that even when, God's hands is hidden, eventually the good people do win. That's the hidden story of Purim, that as long as we do what we need to do, as Esther and Mordechai did, then hopefully Amalek, the bad guys, will get their due. And that's what you're doing, Oded Revivi. That's what I'm trying to do. That's what many of us are trying to do. And you listening to this show should be doing it as well. Don't just listen, but get active and understand that what happens here in Judea and Samaria impacts directly on the future of the state of Israel. And from wherever you are living in the world will also impact on you. We are really the bastion of democracy and freedom here in an area where there is no other. And that should mean a tremendous amount to all the people who want freedom on the entire planet. So thank you, Oded Revivi. I'll also be seeing you at one other event in Baltimore right after the AIPAC event. Maybe just a word about that.
So basically, we've been discussing this whole show about the great importance of Judea and Samaria development, building, expanding of Efrat, security and safety. Yet there are day-to-day challenges. Efrat was established in 1983 with a city plan of becoming a city of 30,000 people. Yes, we are in the process of expanding by 60% after many years that there wasn't any building taking place in Efrat, and we're in the process of growing from a city of 10,000 people to 16,000 people. But in order to jump from 16,000 people to 30,000 people, we still have a hill which is completely not developed, never mind, almost not inhabited, called the Hill of Eitam. The day after Ari Fuld was murdered, we decided to actually go and put a footstep on that hill to remind everybody that it is ours. I've been working on the paperwork for years in order to develop their building. I can say that finally the Ministry of Housing is planning. There are already way more units that we thought at the beginning. Today they're working on 7,500 units just on that hill, which will make the population of Efrat expand to 70,000 people, if not 100,000 people. But there is a problem. It is a extremely big area. Until the plans get through, until they get authorized, until the Prime Minister decides to publish them, until the President of the United States will approve that we actually can have a tender marketing the land there, there are Arabs who are trying to confiscate the land. And therefore, just to maintain the upkeep of the hill, we need support, we need funds. And the community in Baltimore with One Israel Fund were extremely generous to host this event in order to try and help us to raise the funds so we can secure the land of our fathers, the land of our people, to make sure that on that hill we'll be able to build those 7,500 units and not just say, oh, we fell asleep whilst we were on guard.
So I'm going to be at that event as well. I'm the director of tourism for One Israel Funds. And not only that, but if you're going to be in Israel during Passover, there are just a few spaces left. I'm running a bus trip on Wednesday of Chol HaMoed of Passover, the intermediate days, around Gush Etzion. And one of the places, to see the pioneers of Gush Etzion, some of the places where there still needs some development, where people are really doing some incredible things. And one of the places that I'm going to be taking people to is the Etam Hill. Cool. And we're going to be seeing what the future development is. And of course, Ari Fuld, Hashem Yukom Damo, was a resident of Efrat, and his daughter Tamar got married a couple of weeks ago, and I was able to be there. So we're going to choose life. We're going to choose building. We're going to choose growth. We're going to choose creating more families to live here. And all of that together, with God's help, we're going to get to where we need to go. Thank you so much, Mayor Oded Revivi of Efrat, and good luck to all of us next week.
Thank you very much. Safe trips.
Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed the interview. This is, of course, Eve. It is now a day later. It is at the end of Purim. As you can hear, my throat got a little bit better. Still hoarse, but not like I was when I interviewed Oded. Beautiful Purim. I had a wonderful Purim Suda. There's 4 things you're supposed to do for Purim that I'll start with Mem. Knocked them all off. I'm all packed, ready to go. I just wanted to, of course, thank Tabitha and Ben and everybody at the Land of Israel Network. And if you guys are listening to this and it is Sunday morning somewhere on the East Coast, maybe make your way down, register, and join us at the Yesha event. Know what's going to go on between even now and Sunday. People canceling, new people coming, crazy stuff. Always, just the only thing you can count on is that you can't really make plans, but we have learned to roll with it. So anyhow, I am off again. You guys can always be in touch with me, as you know, Eve at thelandofisrael.com. You can also go and check out my website. Anyway, everybody, hope you're all good. Have a wonderful week. Eve Harrow, Rejuvenation on the Land of Israel Network. Take care, everybody. Goodbye for now.
Tune in to Inside Israel Today here on the Land of Israel Network, where we have been introducing the world to the candidates running for Knesset. From the Meretz party on the far left to the Otzma Yehudit party on the right. From the Likud to the Blue and White party. From the Labor Party to the Zehut party. We at Inside Israel Today have been interviewing politicians from across the political spectrum who are running in the April 9th election. Tune in to Inside Israel Today